Welcome to No Magic Bullet podcast series. What's in Your Toolbox is a monthly podcast on mental health. I am your host, Bobby Kay, comedian, mental health advocate, and executive producer of the documentary No Magic Bullet, What's in Your Toolbox, an honest discussion on mental health. I am 70 years young, suffer from Tourette syndrome, and love doing these podcasts that always reminds me to practice what I preach.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2, season 5 of What's in Your Toolbox. I'm again at the world headquarters of No Magic Bullet, and my guest is at his world headquarters, I believe, near Thornbury. So this is an honest discussion on mental health. I'm excited because it's called To Twitch or Not to Twitch, and I finally found somebody out there that excels at what he does, because I excel at what I do, but also wants to talk a little bit about Tourette's. How'd this come about? Jarvis has been helping me because he's the executive director of the Escarpment Corridor, and I just got charitable status for No Magic Bullet, and he's been helping me with all of his professional background. And when we were meeting at his office, he had a little twitch, which to me is a problem because Tourette's is a mimicking disease. So I just said casually, "Hey, this is really bothering my Tourette's." And he said, "Hey, I have Tourette's." I said, "Oh my God, this is incredible." Let me tell you about my Tourette's. I was diagnosed at 22. I had encephalitis. I got Rocky Mountain fever out in Edmonton, was in the hospital. Before they did a spinal tap on me, the psychiatrist came in and said, "Look, is there anything that bothered you?" I said, "Yeah, I twitch." He says, "You twitch? Really? Anybody twitch in your family?" I said, "Yeah, my grandmother twitches her brains out." "Are you nervous ever?" "Yeah." "Do you have a lot of speeding tickets?" "Do you have bad behavior?" "Yeah." "Can you not sit still?" "Yeah." He said, "I think you have Tourette's." And at that time, they were just starting the Tourette's clinic at the Toronto Western with a Dr. Harvey Moldovsky. He was an interesting guy because he also specialized in sleep therapy, so I didn't know if he was putting me to sleep and getting rid of my Tourette's, or he was giving me some advice. But anyways, he did put me on medication for a bit. I hated it, so I've just toughed it through. I guess if I had been on Halidol or Ritalin like he wanted me to, I wouldn't be here with my guest talking like this. I'd probably be a zombie somewhere. Although I might have been a doctor or a lawyer if I could have sat still in school. But it was an energy thing, and I turned lemon into lemonade, and energy became my superpower until I was 50. And then all of a sudden, my positive energy became negative energy, and I got terrible depression. I was hospitalized a couple of times with what they thought was the flu, but it was really a nervous breakdown. But nobody wants to talk about that, especially my family, because my family were all doctors and we were perfect. Nobody was going to have a nervous breakdown. But here I am. My podcast talk about destigmatizing mental health. And so today we're going to destigmatize what about Tourette. What is Tourette's? Tourette syndrome is a neurological or a neurodevelopment disorder that affects children, adolescents, and adults. The condition is characterized by sudden, involuntary movements and or sounds called tics. Tics can range from mild, inconsequential to moderate and severe and are disabling in some cases. It was named after a French neurologist, Jean-Martin Charcot, for his intern, Georges Gilles. Tourette was published in 1885, an account of 9 patients with convulsive tic disorders. It's actually known as an orphan disease because it was just discovered in 1895. Before I introduce you to our guest, we're in good company because some famous people that have Tourette's include Billie Eilish, David Beckham, Dan Aykroyd, Mozart had Tourette's, Howard Hughes has Tourette. We all heard about Louis Capaldi. Just in 2025, he was playing his music in Glastonbury, which is in England, and his Tourette syndrome flared up, and while performing his hit Someone You Loved, he was unable to finish singing the song, and fans had to help him get through the final course. Seth Rogen has Tourette's. After attending pottery classes with his wife in 2017, he began making ceramics. He cites an artist, Kenneth Price, as an inspiration. In January 2021, Rogen revealed on Twitter that he has a mild Tourette syndrome, which runs in his family. So at the bottom of this podcast in the show notes will be a link to Tourette's Canada, which is an association, a nationally registered, volunteer-based charitable organization dedicated to improving the lives of Canadians affected by Tourette syndrome and its associated conditions. So, without ado, I'm going to introduce you to our guest. His name is Jarvis Strong, and he's the executive director, as I mentioned before, of the Escarpment Corridor Alliance. Jarvis joined the Escarpment Corridor Alliance as an inaugural executive director in March 2023. He has 10 years of experience as a nonprofit executive director and has lived in the Southern Georgian Bay area since 2012. Before coming to the area, Jarvis spent 10 years managing summer camps and outdoor education organizations for children and youth. Previous to the ECA, Jarvis led other charities including Camp Quality Canada, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and the Collingwood YMCA. Jarvis has served as a volunteer on numerous charity boards and was the founder of 100 Men Who Care Southern Georgia Bay. He has an HBA from the University of Waterloo, specializing in recreation and park. He is originally from Kitchener. He's the father of 2 teenage daughters. But here's the key. At 19, Jarvis was diagnosed with mild Tourette syndrome. So without ado, I want to introduce you to Jarvis Strong.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Bobby.
My pleasure. Thanks for making time. I know that you were just on a ski trip, and of course, we had to rearrange things, but how do we know each other?
The first time I met you, Bobby, we were doing an event for the Escarpment Corridor Alliance a few years ago. You wandered in, and this was the Edward Bertinsky event at Gaiety, downtown Collingwood. You started talking about your fly fishing passion and offered to see if there was some way that you could provide some services with the fly fishing, maybe help out, donate a package or something like that. So we kept in touch. Through that was the first time that you crossed my path.
At that time, we didn't know anything about each other, except that, because I would have told you that fly fishing is one of my tools if I knew that you were interested in finding out about my podcast. But I was just there to learn more about the ECA, and you had just started, and it was a perfect storm.
That's right. Yeah. At that time, we didn't really get into mental health. You certainly struck me as somebody with big energy, a quirky fella, and I liked you right away because you were unapologetically yourself, which was very cool. I loved that about you. But yeah, as you said in the intro, I guess it was maybe 4 months ago, 6 months ago, you reached out. You had just gotten your charitable status with No Magic Bullet. Congratulations again. That's a big achievement. And you were endeavoring to now be a charity executive director, and you were looking for some advice on setting some stuff up, and you happened to spill the beans that you had Tourette's, and that was a big part of.
We met at the Foundry, and you had a great office, and I was looking at you, and you had this little twitch, and I said, and did you know that Tourette's was a mimicking disease?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's a mimicking disease. I've learned not to say, by the way, do you have Tourette's? Because most people are in denial. They don't want to be labeled. But you were forthcoming. But you said, my Tourette's is mild. So when did you find out, you said at 19, that it was mild, and who diagnosed you?
So I found out in Psychology 101. I was at University of Waterloo, and I was watching a guest lecturer who had Tourette syndrome. He had a much more, I don't want to use the word severe, but nothing else is coming to mind, case of Tourette's, where he had actually what I believe is called coprolalia, which is what most people associate Tourette's with, which I think it's like less than 1% or 5%, and that's that involuntary outbursts of vulgarity and things like that. And I assume that's what Tourette's was. But he started talking about all the different variations of motor and phonics, so noises and physical twitches. And he started doing this head bonk, which is my signature twitch. It's this jerky head kind of thing. And now I'm going to do it the rest of the podcast. and then you're going to start doing it
No, you won't.
because you're going to mimic me.
And we're all going to
gonna
be
twitching
doing it.
around, yeah.
But yeah, to twitch or not to twitch,
That's
that is the
right.
question.
So I saw this guy, and he was describing all his different symptoms as well as accompanying disorders like OCD and anxiety and so on. And I thought, whoa, I think I just put the nail on the head here of what I've had for the last 8, 10 years of my life that my parents were totally mystified by. And I went to my family doctor and described the symptoms. I didn't want to self-diagnose. I just said, I've got this sort of this twitch, I guess is the word you would use. And sometimes I do it so much that it's giving me headaches or I'm distracted and it's a bit awkward socially. Do you have any ideas for me? And he's like, I think I have something that might help you. And he was actually really quick to put me on pharmaceuticals, which was maybe not ideal. But as he was filling out the script, I asked him, I'm like, so is there like a name for this? And he was hesitating. I'm like, because I wondered if it might be Tourette's. He's, oh yeah, it's Tourette's. That's exactly what you have. But I didn't want to tell you because some people don't like the label and then get into denial and so on. So he wasn't even going to tell me. He was just going to put me on the drug. But that's how I was diagnosed by a family doctor. And like you, I didn't last too long on the meds. They really sedated me and I didn't feel like myself. It bottled up that energy and I had to find other ways. Had to learn about toolbox, like you say.
We're going to talk about that, but let's make this personal because I was really looking forward to this. I failed gym. I was 10th in Canada in freestyle, but I failed gym because I just was too anxious and I just couldn't sit still. I had a teacher, Mr. Grant, who would make fun of me.
Yeah.
I was a ski instructor. I did crazy aerial acrobatics. It was a great way of blowing off my energy. And my own granddaughter makes fun of me. She starts mimicking me and making fun of me. And I actually went to a Tourette's talk in Toronto, and a friend of mine who had organized it, she knew I always had bad behavior. I said bad things and did bad things. And she said, you behave yourself. I said, it's a Tourette talk, for God's sakes. So it was really crazy, but it became my superpower. And I think that's what probably happened to you. So we go off the Halidol and the Ritalin and everything. And then what tools did you develop in order to harness this energy? And let's talk about it both in your personal relationships and your business relationships.
Sure. Yeah, so yeah, I did. I tried the meds for a bit, and that was just sedating me, doping me up, as I said. And so just took myself off of that. And but I guess one of the original, not even a tool, but the acknowledgement by somebody that I actually had something that was different in my mind, in my brain, I actually found that immediately helped me. It didn't necessarily make me less twitchy, maybe the opposite, but I no longer felt guilty about it. As a kid, I definitely was self-conscious of it. My dad loved him to death, but he would sometimes get a bit frustrated by it. I'd be at the dinner table and it's just distracting if someone's trying to talk and someone else that you're looking at is bobbing their head and sniffing and twitching like crazy in different ways or making noises. It's distracting. So I can remember my dad sometimes asking me like, okay, Jar, just look at me, just stare at me. And I just want you to focus and not twitch. And of course, we now know that is the worst possible thing you can do because the only thing you're thinking about is twitching. And as I'm sure you've heard, Bob, it's like an itch that you have to scratch. And so the longer you go, when you finally have that outburst, it's just way worse and goofier and so on. But my point here is that the acknowledgement by somebody that I actually had a legitimate neurological disorder, issue, whatever you want to call it, but an ism, if you will, but that it wasn't just something in my mind that I couldn't control, that I made up myself. That really helped me big time.
So I was going to say, what did your dad do? Was he a doctor?
No, he was a banker and then he ran his own business and he was great. He was a busy guy, very supportive, but in things he didn't understand, he found that challenging. And my parents had never heard of Tourette's. Or if they'd heard of it, they thought of the very extreme cases and definitely not that their kids would have such a thing. I think the other thing it makes me think about is the OCD side of Tourette's. Do you have some of those kind of?
I say in my comedy act, I went to see the psychiatrist. I asked him for an opinion. He said I was crazy. I said, I need a second opinion. He says, you're ugly. I said, really, what do I have? He says, you got Tourette's. So I looked it up and I Googled it, and it said body twitches and uncontrollable utterances. And I said, it comes with a triad: ADD, OCD, anxiety, and now I have a fourth problem. I'm delusional. I think I'm a comedian. So the triad was ADD, OCD, and anxiety. But before we talk about that, Jarvis, I asked what your dad did because my family were all doctors.
Oh, right.
My dad was a doctor. My mother was a nurse. I had 5 uncles that were doctor, and my grandmother twitched her brains out, and they thought she was nervous. And I had a friend in high school named Jeff Steinberg, and he barked.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody just, his father actually went on to start the Tourette Society. Whether you bark, whether you twitch, whether you got bad behavior, whether you've got ADD, nobody wanted to talk about it.
No, it's true. We're very quick to medicate using pharmaceuticals and things like that and not find other ways to deal with it. So yeah, just talking about it and knowing there was someone else out there that had this issue was super helpful. Yeah. I'm hoping that kids listening, maybe thinking they might have Tourette's right now, and knowing that there's other people out there, hopefully that's helpful to them, because it's when you just think something's wrong with you and it's just in your head, that's a terrible feeling.
I don't think it's so much the kids listening. I think it's the parents listening and saying, oh my God, we've really been dismissive of this. And maybe this is something to look up to. When I was 22, I'm 70 now. There was no Google. There was no Dr. Google. There was nothing. You couldn't look up this stuff. So yeah, I had ADD, and I had to be sent to a free school because I was just too wild.
You sound like you might have been wilder than me, but I certainly had wilder days as I got a bit older, but not necessarily for different reasons. We'll just say that. But yeah, those were some of the things that I dealt with. And then as I got older, and once I figured out that there was something going on, I did a little bit of research. And it wasn't actually necessarily to deal with my Tourette twitches, but more anxiety. I discovered the power of exercise. How that, when you go work out, whatever your thing is, playing a team sport or going for a run or whatever. But when you exert yourself and you get that endorphin release, I found that hugely beneficial. And then I started becoming a little bit more of an outdoorsman. First summer after high school, I went out west as a kids camp counselor in Kananaskis, Alberta, and I discovered the Rocky Mountains, and I fell in love with nature. And so when you start combining exercise in nature in natural places, I just found that it was this real powerful medication that really could calm yourself, whether it was the anxiety, the stress, the twitches, whatever. The best tool you can have, in my opinion, for mental health and healing.
We had a previous guest who's a comedian. Anxiety didn't happen till he had a child. And then all of a sudden he was worse. I'll go first. I had a child. I was nervous, anxious. I had catastrophic thinking, so I started running. I ran 10 minutes, then I ran 20 minutes, then I ran 30 minutes. I always used to run in a straight line, and then I'd run an hour, and eventually I ran the New York Marathon. So people got to understand that, to get rid of this, you got to run the marathon. It's a tremendous amount of energy, and yes, I had terrible anxiety. And what about OCD?
I had the OCD as well. It was a little part of my OCD.
My OCD is I have to take pictures of the stove when I leave, because when I leave, I go, I don't think I turned it off. I've driven as far as Orangeville and had to drive all the way back just because I didn't think it was off. So I've had to develop strategies. So now, here we go. These are some of the strategies that I developed.
I would say that Tourette's is a part of, I feel very proud of what I've achieved in my career. So I'm going to call that success. And I think that my success in life started when I got more confident about myself. And I got more confident in my mid-teen years when and I think a lot of young people can relate to this, but I just stopped trying to be somebody else. I just embraced who I was, that I was a bit quirky. I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the most athletic. I wasn't the best looking, but that I had some unique characteristics about me, and I had a pretty good sense of humor, and I was goofy, and I started embracing those things. And I can remember sometimes using Tourette's as part of my humor, and sometimes self-deprecating humor, making fun of my twitches and things like that. That helped me start to develop social confidence. And that social confidence later helped me become good at relationship building and connecting with people. And those two skills, connecting, relationship building, put me on the path to where I am today, to have the confidence to lead an organization. And what I do a lot with the Escarpment Corridor Alliance is I do public speaking, and I do a lot of fundraising, and a lot of that fundraising is relationship based. And so while I'm not necessarily, I may be twitching or not twitching when I'm maybe talking with a donor or doing a presentation to a community group, but I attribute the confidence to just be myself, not try and be anything robotic or perfection, just embrace who you are, those little quirky parts of you. And that's been my superpower. No one, what does Dr. Seuss say? One of his favorites is no one, just be yourself. And that gives me that power to get out there and connect with people and share my gifts. So that's how I tap into it in my business.
I've seen you speak. Your public speaking, you're very motivating. It's interesting because a lot of people say, Bob, I can't believe you can stand up and be a comedian. That's when I'm most relaxed. I am most relaxed when I'm out in front of people because I focus my energy on what my task at hand is. The most unrelaxing thing for me is to relax because I'm 7 years old. I've had this thing most of my life. The idea of expending energy because that's just what I do. And it's crazy because one of the things they say in mental health that I've learned because I've been doing this so many years, and this is my 5th season with podcasts, is make your anxiety, make your OCD, make your ADD your friend. You only have so much energy. Don't spend all your time trying to get rid of it. Embrace it and let it tell you who it is. Now, my Tourette's made it very difficult for me to be married. It's hard to be married to a person that has Tourette's. And my last girlfriend, too, they just don't understand it. They just think it's bad behavior.
Interesting. Okay.
It's hard to have a long-term relationship with somebody that's got Tourette's because my Tourette's is like a cycle. Like I can tell you during a 30 or 60-day period when it's getting bad, and that's when I have to be kind to myself.
Interesting.
Well,
yeah, a little bit. I don't know if I have cycles. Now, are we talking full moon here, Bob, when it's at its peak? Beard get thicker as well?
I just know that it's a cycle. I've been in the cycle for so long that now I know that I'm getting Tourette, I call it, and I just be kind to myself and I just accept it because I know it's going to go away.
Right. That's a really good question. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to do some self-observation and tracking of that. 100% stress, anxiety brings on, I guess you could say, a cycle, but having a bad day, I would just say, of being really twitchy and when I'm twitching, it's exhausting it's because you're physically exerting a lot of extra energy and things like that, especially when you're trying to bottle it up, it gets even worse.
Yeah, bottle it up because the energy goes somewhere else.
That's interesting, though, with the relationship piece. I don't know. I'd have to ask one of my former partners if it was an issue for them. But what I can say is that I'm single, like you, also divorced. So, yeah, you make me wonder here. I hope it is. Did you say Seth Rogen is married and he's got Tourette's?
I don't know if he's
still
married.
Is there hope?
Maybe we don't want to. We seem to be doing just fine. You just came back from kicking horse, skiing, and we seem to be doing pretty good. So I think I'm going to go with that Tourette's is a superpower.
Let's stick with that. Yeah, let's stick with that.
And I think that's the positive way of looking at it. And like you said, if somebody's listening to this not so much a kid, because they don't really listen to podcasts
Right.
like this, but adults, if we can help one person who's sitting there going, you know what, in my family there was twitchers, and my kid does some twitching, and instead of me, like your father, chastising you or saying, like, focus, look at me, let's try to control this thing, just let the person do what they have to do. It's not going to be
Mhm.
forever. And but I had an amazing support team. I call it my BAS, Bob's Amazing Support Team, because I was a connector. Friendships require nourishing. Actually, it's interesting. My oldest friend is Dr. Jack Langer, and at the intro of our podcast, he's now a musician. He's a retired pediatric surgeon. But somehow he attracted Tourette's. He went to the University of Waterloo, and his roommate had Tourette's. Then he went to St. Louis, where he operated on babies in the womb, and he had a friend whose son had Tourette's, and I have Tourette's, so I think he's a Tourette magnet. And I'm going to introduce him to you.
University of Waterloo, that's where I also went and where I discovered that lecture, Small World.
It's interesting that in our travels, what people affect us and tell us. But this was a guy that was up there talking. He was lecturing. So he obviously had figured it out that
And embraced it
him.
as his superpower because he was up there barking and yipping and various phonic noise tics. He was doing all the things, and it wasn't to put on a show. It was just he explained this is what it is. And it was so powerful. And I guess maybe I tapped into that superpower because I spent out of university 10 years or so working at kids' summer camps, often with kids that were facing various barriers and challenges in their life. And I would often come across kids as a camp counselor in my cabin group that would have ADD, or a few, I think, probably did have Tourette's. And when I told them, hey, I do that too, and I have this twitch, and we were able to talk about it, and I was able to make these bonds with these kids. And I would like to think that it was helpful to them beyond just that week at camp, that they maybe went home and thought, I met a pretty decent guy who's my counselor, and he's had some of these issues. He was a little twitchy, hyperactive, whatever, and he seemed to turn out okay. So hopefully I was able to have a positive influence on some of those kids by opening up and sharing some of these labels that are out there.
Listen, Jarvis, unfortunately, we've run out of time. But this has been super fantastic. I was looking so forward to it, to be able to talk to somebody like yourself and have an honest discussion. And I know that we're going to affect somebody. So for now, this is Bobby Colvin and
Jarvis Strong
saying thank you so much for listening to this episode of What's in Your Toolbox. So everybody, as you can see, I love this. When I was first supposed to talk to Jarvis, I woke up at 5:30 in the morning and prepared myself, and then he had to unfortunately deal with work, and work's more important than doing podcasts. And I was disappointed, but he's come around, and I think he's identified some tools that we both have. One is exercise. His was in Kananaskis. Mine was running the New York Marathon. He's a great relationship person. I'm a great relationship person. And I can tell you, knowing Jarvis, his energy, which manifests itself in mild Tourette's, is his superpower. So at the end of these podcasts, I always pull something from a newspaper. And on the 25th of January, there was a story about true companions, and it talked about AI. And is it going too far? Does it help us in a chat room? And they do have AI now for mental health. And instead of it just researching it, you can get into a chat room, just like Jarvis and I are doing right now, and you can actually chat with a bot a little bit about your AI, and it will accumulate all kinds of information. And I think that's a good thing for AI. So, in conclusion, if you or someone you know think they have Tourette's, they can contact me. My contact information is at the bottom. The Tourette Society will be at the bottom. And Jarvis and I are going to continue to work together. He's going to help me and figure out this whole charitable world, and I'm going to help him. We're going to be putting these podcasts on YouTube, and you'll see Jarvis and I, and you'll see that neither one of us are really twitching very much at all. That's because we're focused, and we're having a good time. There'll also be show notes, connection to the ECA, which is the Escarpment Corridor Alliance that Jarvis is the executive director of, doing great stuff up here in Gray County and in Simcoe, saving land, allowing it to be put back into, I guess, the Nature Conservatory. And Jarvis and I are a bit selfish because that's our medicine. We need to walk in nature. We need to have nature-based wellness. We need to have walks. We need to be able to run. And that is better than pumping Ritalin down our system. So you'll be able to subscribe in the show notes, and you'll be able to get in touch with me, and I could get in touch with Jarvis if you wanted to. So my next guest, the episode's called Good Vibrations. I have 14 advisors for my charity that all have industry-specific knowledge, and the next person, she is my osteopath. Please stay tuned, subscribe, and look forward to the next episode called Good Vibrations. So for now, thank you so much for listening to this episode of What's in Your Toolbox.
Thank you for listening to No Magic Bullet, What's in Your Toolbox. I am not a doctor, but I have lived experience in dealing with the many challenges of mental health. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share with others who will benefit from learning about tools they can use to deal with their own mental health challenges. If we can help just one person, all this effort to bring this podcast to you is worth it.